going to start off with some onion. And we're going to slice it. Now these are large onions. I'm not going to need quite that same amount, really, am I? So what I'm going to do is cut it in half, save the other half for another recipe, and it will keep better like that in the fridge without drying out. Take off the skin, remove the fronds. Now, for the soup, I always take off an extra layer of skin. The inside layer of skin tends to be just that little bit tougher on the onions. So when you're using it for a soup or a puree, you really don't want it in there because it's going to be a little bit inedible. And quite simply, I'm going to chop the end off and slice it. I'm going to take my pan and I'm going to turn on the heat. First time I've used this induction stove, so see if I can work it out. Manual program 3 seems to be working. Always good. Right, I'm going to start off with a little bit of olive oil because I like the taste of olive oil. You know, you could use rapeseed oil. I tend not to use vegetable oil much, and when I do, it's usually a rapeseed variety because it's that whole ethics again. It's choice of ingredients that makes the difference to every recipe you cook. The best ingredients gives you the best outcome. It's that simple. So I've got the heat on here. I'm going to add some butter to melt that because I want that richness, I want that dairy flavour. So unsalted butter. Let that butter melt in the oil so it's not going to burn on the bottom too quickly. It's just going to start melting, as you can probably see here. Right, and when that's melted, we're going to get the onions in. And what we're looking for is we're just going to sweeten these onions up, start them cooking. So take off that raw edge that onions have. Sweetness with root vegetable is important. That's what we're after, a balance of the sweetness of the onion and that onion flavour, and then the celeriac, that earthiness and mouth fillingness that you get of that with a little floral tones of the saffron. I think works amazingly well. So I'm just going to turn the heat down a little bit. I don't want it going too fast on that. You can kind of see what's happening there. While we're doing that, while the onions are cooking, I'm going to get some celeriac on. So probably recognise celeriac, knobbly root thing. I think it's a phenomenal flavour actually, personally. Very underrated. Love it raw as a slaw style idea, or a classic remoulade, which is basically just finely shredded, a little bit of lemon juice, salt, and a kind of mayonnaise into that. Sometimes a little bit of mustard. I've washed this already and left it in the fridge just to dry it a little bit on the outside because you don't want all that dirt going in and on your board. And I'm just peeling off, as you can see, paring off that outside layer of the celeriac. And all I'm going to do for this is I want them quite chunky because I want it to take a while to cook down. It's not going to be super quick. It's going to take a little bit of time, so I'm going to dice it up into large dice. And this soup's going to cook over a while. If I want something quick cooking, like a cauliflower soup, I'll shred it really finely and very thin and cook it that way, but not for this soup. This soup is going to take its time to allow the flavour of the celeriac to develop and really get the best out of this vegetable and get it to cook through. Now I'm going to add a little bit of sea salt. I tend to use these sea salt crystals. This is the Cornish Sea Salt Company. Sea salt pure has a slightly higher salt level because it isn't loaded with that sort of anti-caking agent, so it's a pure salt, which is why we tend to use it. There's no muddying up of flavour here. I love it. I mean, the flavour is phenomenal of this salt. Once that's in, I've just seasoned it lightly. I'm going to season it as we go along, just build up that layer of flavour. But just now, I'm going to allow the celeriac to cook in that butter with the onions, and then I'm going to add a pinch of this saffron strands. So, British saffron. I mean, seriously, most of what I use is British where I can, certainly the key ingredients. So, even down to wasabi root that I get is British wasabi. So, you know, there's several places growing it now. There's the The main one is the Wasabi Company, and that is smelling awesome. I'm going to show you the scallops. So I had to get these from Scotland because I find it quite hard to get scallops down here. I don't have a Michelin star, so it's quite hard to attract some suppliers, but I do my best and I stick to my guns. Quality produce. So, scallops here. Now, there's a muscle in the scallops which connects the meat to the top. So I'm going to show you what I do. I come in, now I'm left-handed, so if you're right-handed you might have to do it upside down to come in. But I come in at this side here and edge the knife. I put a little bit of weight on the bottom of the knife here. Any thin bladed knife's good. Little bit of weight on there to sort of balance it up against the top of the shell so we don't lose as much. And then I just flip out the knife and then release it there. Now, as you can see, get rid of that shell just now. I do keep the shells for use. The muscle, the adductor muscle that holds the scallop to the shell is this little lighter bit here. If you can see, the lighter bit there is the muscle. So that's what we're trying to cut. So when we put the knife in at this side, so from looking on the top with the hinge towards you, it's on the left hand side. So if you're right-handed, you might want to turn it upside down and cut it that way so you can ensure that you get a nice definite cut on that. But key is just simply slide your knife in and do that, get the nice scallop in. Okay, next stage in prepping the scallops is to take the scallops, and all we're going to do is use a spoon to scrape away the meat from the shell here, like this. And you can see that side of it comes away quite easily, the meat itself, the actual part of the scallop we want to keep. But that adductor muscle is holding it onto the shell, and that's what we've got to scrape out. So all we do is take the knife, the spoon, sorry, and just scrape away at the shell like that. Quite simple. Okay, so again, pull the meat away from the shell so it opens up and it's not going to get damaged, and then just use the spoon to scrape away that muscle and separate it from the nice clean shell, which I'll use for presentation in other dishes. One more time. There we go. This celeriac, as you can see, is just starting to soften on the outside. It's starting to cook. It smells great. I'm getting this really strong, sweet, earthy celeriac smell coming off there. So I'm just going to add my, well, you can use stock or water for this. I'm using water today just because I've not had time to make up my stock. But I would use, classically, I would use chicken stock. Not too much water because you don't want to wash out the flavour of the celeriac, because you can't strain it off, because that's all flavour you want to do. You'd end up cooking it out for too long, and then yeah, you'd never be happy. So this is the best way to get the flavour, is just to let that go. I'm going to bring that up to the boil and let it simmer away until the celeriac's tender enough. Tiny bit of salt, just to make sure. Taste it as we go along. I'm going to taste it again as we blend it, because then we're going to find out exactly where we're sitting with it all. Right, next, finishing the scallops. So, we've got the scallops here, several parts. We've got the skirt, we've got the little roll muscle here, which is stunning, but when frying, particularly with this soup, the texture, I want a pure scallop flavour. So what I do is, I put my thumb down the side of that muscle that you see there, and you can see gently now, put your thumb along the side of that muscle to pull the main muscle away from that skirt, and you end up with your nice clean scallop there, okay? And all the rest of that I will trim off the roe there and use that for a separate recipe. You can freeze them for later use if you want to get enough. There's some amazing things you can do on flavoured compound butters. You can make risottos. I love scallop risotto. I'll do that sometime here as well. It's phenomenal. Slide my thumb along the inside there to get off all that skirt and discoloration there. That's it. So again, with the top side, the side you cut, top side up, just slide your thumb down in there and take off that. There we go. So I've got a bowl of ice cold water here, the scallops, and a plate to put them on. I'm going to take a little bit of paper just to pat them dry, okay? Make sure I've got all the skirt off the scallops there. Keep it as pure as possible. And then we dip the scallops quickly in, one at a time, to wash off any excess dirt, stuff on the outside, and straight onto the paper. Quickly, you don't want to leave the scallops in too long. They'll absorb a little bit of water, and as they fry up they won't be great, they won't be as good. So just dip them in quickly and out onto the paper. And I'm just going to pat them dry with that paper, and then onto my plate. What I'm going to do is take the scallops and I'm going to cut them in half. Because this is a soup, you don't want a huge lump of scallop there. You don't want this big mouthful of scallop along with the soup, because then you can't cut it. So we cut the fibres. Now the fibres in a scallop run that way. Okay, so that's where you get the most use. If I want to tenderise it and keep it as a small bite, I want to cut it across those fibres to shorten them. A bit like cutting a steak, carving a steak. So what I'm going to do is cut across the scallop that way, and as I cut, flip it open. Still moving, look at that pulsing. That is still alive, even though it's been in my fridge for a couple of days. So it just shows how fresh they are when I get them. So cut them and let the cut side flip open on top. And that's important for me for presentation, because that cut side is going to be the side I fry down. That's the presentation side. That's going to be the side that I fry the scallops on, and then it's going to be the side that shows up on the top side of the plate. Right, we're going to fry the scallops now. Really simple here, very quick. Better get my tray ready to put them on. I've got butter. I've got thyme this time, just for a little bit of extra flavour into the scallops, and some olive oil and some salt. So what I'm going to do is start this pan heating up. So obviously I've got a non-stick pan, very flat base, non-stick pan that's going to hold the heat, this one, but also I'm using induction, so it's got to be induction compatible for this. Right, nice and hot there. I'm going to put just a dash of olive oil into the pan. These are quite thin, so they're going to cook quite quickly. I'm going to make sure that I get the temperature a little bit higher so that they cook, get that nice caramelization. If the temperature is too low in the pan, they're not going to caramelize. They're not going to get that nice flavour on the outside that you want and that texture, because they'll just stew in the pan. And if you overcrowd the pan. So nice bit of heat there. I can see the steam, smoke coming off now. So I'm going to lightly season the top of the scallops with the salt, and then I'm going to place them in one by one. Gently place them in. When you're placing something in the pan, start closest to you and place away from you. That way any oil that splashes up will go in the other direction. What I'm going to do is put a couple of sprigs of thyme in there, just to add that little bit extra flavour. Now, as you can probably see, I'm not shaking the pan, I'm not moving the scallops just now. They're getting that heat transfer at the moment. They're getting a nice colour on the outside there. I'm happy with that. So what I'm going to do is flip those halves over. And then I'm going to turn the temperature down a touch and add in my unsalted butter. Now, still plenty of heat in that pan there, and I'm just going to spoon that butter over the scallops. Right, so second part now, the soup is ready. So I've got my fancy cooking machine here, which is my blender, Thermomix. Anyone will work, to be honest, as long as you got it cooked to the right point. As you can see, the balance of liquid's not too much there. So I'm going to pour that all in. put the lid on and blend it, and I blend it for a good amount of time. So for this I can actually set the timer that it blends for, and that'll just make it nice and smooth. If you've got the viscosity right, the sort of balance of the cooking of the soup and the liquid content, it'll turn out nice and smooth. So I'm going to let that go and come back to it. Right, so stop this blending for a second. I'm just going to add a tiny splash of cream just to enrichen it a little bit and round it off. And then I'm going to put the lid back on and blend it just for another second or two, just another 30 seconds on this, and I'll show you what it looks like. Okay, this is finished blending. Take this off, have a wee look, have a wee taste. So I'm going to check for now, have a look at it. I need to check for the consistency to see if it's right, so if it's soupy enough, and I'm quite happy with that. It's a nice thick soup, it'll hold the scallops well, and then taste it for flavour and seasoning. So I'm going to take a nice bowl, and I'm literally just going to pour a portion of the soup into this bowl. Yep, and that goes away. And then the scallops that we just fried, not long out, into here. Now, you can garnish this with whatever you want. You can keep it nice and simple like this. I mean, I love it as simple as this. The scallops on top. Keep it as simple as that. You could dress it with a little bit of olive oil if you like, if you want that flavour. You could add a dice of apple. Would be nice, that fresh fruitiness and acidity to cut through the richness of the celeriac soup. Celeriac and saffron soup, divacot scallops. Banging.